the car coming here. I'm grand now.
Well, I think one of the things that's great about this movie is there's just such an infectious sense of enthusiasm. Like even when it's bleak, it's never depressing because you feel the joy that all of you took in making the movie. It's really clear to the audience. And I guess I want to go back to the beginning a little bit for Brendan and Martin, which is Six Shooter. Martin, that was, I think, the first thing you ever directed. And at that point, Brendan was already very well established, very highly regarded. So for you as a young director directing him, was that intimidating, inspiring?
Inspiring mostly. I think I was intimidated by everything else that was going on, but actually Brendan sort of guided me through that and helped me through that. So it was almost the opposite of intimidating, really. And but I think we had a great time on it.
Yeah, we had a brilliant time. It was like, I remember there was an initial kind of a chat about the cop death sequence that kind of I was a little bit worried about. And we had a brilliant meal that I always was one of the standout kind of moments when we chatted through basically what we were trying to do with it. And Martin said, I can still remember, it was as we were leaving, he said, all my work is about love. And I had been a huge I was blown away by seeing 3 of his plays in the one day in Dublin, something I was dreading because I really was. I came out exhilarated in a way that I cannot remember before or since ever feeling after a full day of theatre. That was just mind-blowingly brilliant. And so I was a huge fan of Martin, and anyway, but just in terms of talking about the nature of the work, even retrospectively, I remember began to think through the plays and think about how no matter how awful people's behaviour, you never hate the people. And that was a real turning point, and we got a train. We owned a train for about half a day between Waterford and Wexford. Do you remember a line that's now shut down?
Yeah. Oh, is it shut down?
Yeah.
But remember, we could only use it from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. We had to give it back for the evening rush hour. It was a real train.
Yeah. It was great. And I remember there was a particular dog on top of a shed that made it into the final cut. Do you remember? Very like the one in Bruges where you see here, poor little sad-faced dog.
There's a bit more than the sad face going on with that.
So yeah, thematic kind of joins up there, but yeah, no, it was a brilliant experience, and I remember Martin thinking, oh, I'm not sure, but because it's a different thing, isn't it? And I remember sort of asking, well, do you want anybody else in charge of your writing? This is at the end of the short, and I remember saying, I don't know how anybody else, because first of all, your plays are very cinematic anyway, and your vision is very cinematic from the very beginning, even in theatre. I could never imagine anybody else directing your plays with anything like the same plot, you know what I mean? So it was a fascinating thing. It really was great for a very learning thing for everybody on it.
Well, that point about how cinematic your plays are makes me wonder, did you always want to be a film director? Were plays a means to an end, or
not really. I never imagined ever being in a position of making a film, to be honest. So the plays were their own thing, but I was seriously trying to make those as cinematic as possible, to have anything possible happening on stage. But no, it just kind of evolved, and after about 10 years of the plays, I was in a position, I guess, to get a short film made, and then was writing, I think, this, and even Seven Psychopaths at the same time. And I remember it was almost a choice between which one to go with first. I think luckily I made the right decision. But yeah, no, it wasn't a means to an end. It was evolution, I guess.
You won an Oscar for that short. Like, it's the first thing you directed.
It was a weak year.
That's what I have to come up with.
Well, Colin, what do you remember about the first time you read the script for In Bruges? Do you remember how it came to you and what your response was?
Yeah, I thought it was extraordinary. I thought it was like, of course, nothing else I had ever read, because it simply wasn't. It wasn't even just a perspective, it was kind of a fact. His voice is so unique, and the dialogue was so rapid fire and humorous, but beneath the humor was this kind of desire to unearth the questions that exist around the hardships that we all experience in life, the hardships of friendship, the regrets of the past, the loss of love. You lost your missus. I didn't know who I was. Ray, the guilt and the shame that he felt, the depression that he was living in. So it was, and then I tried to get him not to cast me. I said to him, look, I come with a good bit of baggage, and I would hate for people to come into the theatre to see this film, or to stay away from it even because of a relationship that they may have with me, and the press and all that stuff. And I'd gone through some public stuff within a year before reading the script. So I really did, but he gave me very little attention, as he's done ever since. And he didn't listen to me, thankfully. So I was just and then began the process of, I couldn't imagine, any time I've read what I feel like is an extraordinary and original and almost in a contradictory fashion, grounded in the real world but otherworldly as well, piece of writing. And Martin's writing is like that as well. I mean, that's a very recognisable world, and there were very few sets built, and we leaned into the beauty of the nature that was all around. But there is something else at play, there's something otherworldly that we still recognise as ours, but I suppose the simplest word is, and it's thrown around a lot, is heightened. But Yorgos Lanthimos as well, similarly, when he and Efthimis Philippou and I read The Lobster for the first time, I had the reaction of, how in God's name do you ever inhabit this like it's normal? Any of it. It's so unusual, and yet somehow I recognise myself, the people I know, the people I love, the very essence of humanity at the centre of it all. I'm just saying Lobster, but how do you make this normal? And so what this fella does is he gives you 3 weeks. He gets the cast together for 3 weeks, and you sit in a room, and there's a coffee machine in the corner, there's some granola bars, and a piece of chewing gum. And that was after the success of Bruges. That was but honestly, you have that time. You don't get that in film very often. That time, and I certainly need it so that I can almost normalise, which is by its very essence incredibly abnormal, anormal, original writing.
Yeah, I mean, I find it so crazy that films don't have that rehearsal period, because to me it seems like the most cost-effective way of taking, you don't have a crew of people all waiting around while you're figuring things out, right?
Yeah, I don't understand it either. It's the cheapest thing you can do. I guess it's about schedules and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it depends on who you're working with. Like, I remember after Bruges, I said, right, that's it, that's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. We've found so much in the rehearsal room and saved so much time and money, obviously, thereby, and all that. And then I went working with Paul Wintergrass, and he his whole modus operandi was completely and utterly different. He'd write as he would, so he'd spend a whole morning going at something, and they said, no, it's not right. And then he said, you should be over there. And the whole thing would move over there, and he'd write 4 pages of dialogue, see, give your name, I'll have a go at that. And it was the most completely different. So, like, everybody has their own creative process. It's a bit like acting as well. You just have to. It's a fantastic thing that how different people come.
I love that part of it.
Yeah, come to their particular place. Yeah, by different rules.
I won't give it, like, you've been asked through the years, I've been asked, by people that you're about to start working with, and it's usually the directors would ask you, do you like to rehearse or not rehearse? And I will not give an answer to that. I'll go, whatever you want to do, that's what we'll do, because I think that's you do lean into director, and I love it. I mean, if I read, but I don't have a preference, because just magic stuff comes up and you don't prepare as well somehow. But I do with certain material. I tell you, his stuff, it just begs you to just dig and familiarize. And it doesn't mean that we arrived on the set and there was no conversations and we knew exactly what we were doing. It just means I think you said it once, B, that you know you don't have to go down that cul-de-sac. And you don't have to go down that cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And there's other ones waiting for you,
There's other layers. And also I think Martin's writing is particularly lyric, it's particularly musical, and so the rhythm of the lines is very important. And like from the very beginning, I remember you said something like, look, if there's 3 dots, you know, if there's a sentence in it, there's 3 dots, it's kind of 3 pauses. It's not 3 pauses, but the length of 3 dots is the pause, or something like that. And the reason is, it's not in any way a straitjacket. But like I have to say, because maybe of the texture of the language, and because I go out to the west of Ireland an awful lot, and the language is kind of, well, it's Dublin language here, I guess, in Bruges. And that even was an interesting one because it was originally supposed to be 2 cockneys, isn't that right?
Yeah, 2 London guys. But we didn't have to change much at all.
There was practically nothing. It was amazing, and like that's a long story anyway. But you know, Dublin and it was kind of in a semi-British city for a long time anyway. So Dublin speak is quite quite easy. Very little we had to change when the characters were Irish. But it's the nature of Martin's writing in terms of the way it is in the plays, the way it is in the movies. There's a rhythm to it, and it's just so pleasing when you're reading the script. You just get the script, and it's like, oh, you're like on that train, you know, going between Waterloo and Wexford, because there's a rhythm to it. So the rehearsal that helps to explore that is different. If really all you need to do is express the thought, you know, and I think maybe as your career increases, I think in some way you want to rely less on that. But I've always found that one of the most beautiful parts of your writing is the actual language. It's such a pleasure to hear the music of it.
Yeah, so the planning. Martin, I talked to your cinematographer on Banshees, and he was telling me, you guys storyboarded everything pretty strictly. Now, a lot of people, some directors think, oh, if you storyboard too much, it's going to kind of freeze you up or something. But I mean, is there a sense where it's actually sort of this rehearsal idea? Is it more liberating to have that plan going in, and you can actually be more flexible?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's I still each time think of myself as a first-time filmmaker in lots of ways because I didn't do film school or any of that. So I need some kind of crutch to know that there's a way. How do you get through a scene in 6 shots or something? That can change on the day, obviously. But to know that if you've got those 6, you have the scene. That's is useful for me, I think. But also, if you're storyboarding the whole thing, when you go from one scene to another, you can see what kind of visual references can do that. If one scene it takes place in front of a window, for instance, the next scene you'll think about entering that way. So it's that kind of stuff. I don't write too many visual elements into a script. It's pretty much just the character and the dialogue and what happens. But that for me is the first time I think of each image on its own.
He storyboards. When you storyboard, do you start to see the film?
The next one. When you storyboard. Do you start seeing the film clearer than when you write? Because obviously when you write, you do see a certain amount of clarity or maybe blocking and all that kind of stuff. When you storyboard,
It's the first time to actually see images. Yeah, pretty much. I think I've heard all of the characters and all the conversations up to that point, but I haven't seen anything that happens up until this.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
No, that's when they know it.
Watching the movie tonight on the big screen, I think amazingly it was the first time I ever noticed, and I felt stupid for not noticing because you basically tip it off with a touch of evil homage. That whole thing with Brendan on the phone with Ray Fine, I think is all done one unbroken take.
Yeah,
right?
5 minutes. 5 minutes on
Which is
brilliant performance.
Yeah.
It's very funny because Ray Fiennes is just a gent through and through. He came over from London to Bruges to be on the other end of that phone call. Now, this was a phone call. But it's a degree of his professionalism and just his kind of collaborative willingness to go to the very end if we needed to talk about it, or if you had to have to chat. He was was there in the next room. It was like amazing, yeah. That was kind of fun, 5 or 6 minutes worth, and you kind of think it's kind of challenge. I think you were just loving it, and I was loving it. And then with Rafe on the other side, it just became a bit of a dance, really, with an unseen partner. So yeah, that's kind of stuff I think increasingly that Mark's leaving space for. I think again, kind of a cinematic decision, purely cinematic.
Yeah. But weirdly, in the next film, I think there might be sort of less of those kind of moments, sort of bravura, whatever that is. I think in the next one, is everyone staying for the next one? And Luce says okay, that's good.
Plug your ears.
I think there's less of that overtly cinematic language and more room for acting.
Not more, just different maybe.
Yeah.
It's interesting developmentally. It's more about your head than because we go anywhere, Mark. No, but you know what I mean. It really is the word that you fashion. Sorry, direct forward is always fascinating. Yeah, it's very hard not to keep thinking of the next movie and trying not to talk about it. But no, so there's always a kind of an exploration, and I wouldn't change that 5-minute conversation. Phone thing for the world either. It didn't feel showy or that we were trying to prove a point or anything.
Yeah, and weirdly, when you're watching it, I don't think it seems like a unbroken take.
No, I mean, I've seen the movie 4 times, and that was the first time I ever realized it.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
cinematic aficionado, touch me, you know, the references. It's 5 minutes to get. It was extraordinary. You know, it owes, of course, to the simple fact of the writing being what it was, the ownership of the character, and the inhabiting the character that Brendan was at that stage, and allowing it to play. Yeah, of course, I remember very clearly. Jealous.
Well, speaking of ownership of character, talking about Banshees, something that struck me that's really interesting about that movie is, and I won't get into spoilers for people who are seeing it for the first time, but there is this idea that Brendan's character finds Colin's character boring, and you have to get across why Brendan's character would consider Colin's character boring without Colin's character boring the audience. Now, is that something?
Speak for yourself.
It's still only a 7, mine was a 9.
What was the
The question is, how do you take someone so obviously charismatic and make them
Well, for you, Colin, I mean, how does that inform the way you play this guy? I mean, to me it seems like it would be a really...
No, hold his feet to the flames, you asked him.
Oh yeah.
But well, it's only Brendan's character's opinion. This is all in the first 5 minutes. Opinion that he's that way. I don't think he's boring at all.
No, he's not. It's everyone needs the town or the island without giving that away. Everywhere, the world, this city, this room, the line at Starbucks. People make micro judgments, and everyone needs to classify someone as something. There has to be the jester, there has to be the prince, there has to be the clowns that say the jester, no, it's not. There has to be the king, and there's all these style things and these archetypes that we live within. That's my long-winded way of saying that my character isn't dull, and wasn't dull, but he's not exactly, you'll see he's not as cultured and he's not as worldly. And he's probably not as interesting as this man, but there's an integrity to him. That's the thing, I suppose that's the thing. Is that if you write characters with integrity, and if you write them with honesty, and if you have, and I wouldn't suggest this be me, but if you have the right actor, they could be there in stillness, without dialogue. I mean, I think of Sam Morton in the film that she did with Sean Penn, Sweet Lowdown. And of course, not a word of dialogue, and one of the most interesting, most beautiful, most elaborate, most articulate characters in film that I can remember. So look, the writing was
it was everyone else. It was on everyone else really. How the island referred to him, and even his own sister a little bit perhaps. But I didn't find him dull.
No, he wasn't dull, and like, I don't want to go into saying what he was because it's too early, you haven't seen it yet. But I think that the idea of a prism through which somebody is viewed is amazing, and that people can switch perspective where the same action appears to be, from being one positive thing, appears to be a completely negative thing, just all by shifting the prism a little bit. And suddenly, you know, you can see it in a movie theatre. If somebody takes against it and finds something awkward about the movie, it can spread like COVID-19. It can go through the place. Where if somebody stops, not only doesn't laugh, but actively sort of with their grunting, anti-laughs. Or if you're sitting even at home and you're watching it with somebody like, for example, my wife, and she's not laughing, it's very difficult to involve yourself in the hilarity of what's going on. I do love her bits, but it's very hard to watch this. Without feeling this stupid, what are you laughing at? In other words, we are herd animals, and it might be something to have to think about, because one of the great things, hopefully, that you go away with from Banshees is a discussion. And that is one of the things that we do go with the flow, because we are herd animals. And so if somebody is classified as dull, suddenly that becomes the truth if it's said at the right time by the right person. And if somebody is extraordinary, like Yeats writes about the fisherman, which he did, and talks about the simplicity of honest toil and how the communion with the sea and the elements is basic sophistication at a kind of and wisdom at a profound level. That's how you see that fisherman. So I think it's about prisms and perception really, and actually naming people and naming. Sometimes defining people with names can be so instrumental. It can be so creative and so destructive.
Did you guys find anything challenging about playing these two characters who are, basically a deteriorating friendship, and the two of you are obviously very fond of each other? I mean, did you have to do anything coming into this? Were you thinking, maybe we shouldn't hang out during this or talk during this, or what was your?
No, there was a thought. I was a little bit nervous when I read the script because I thought, I know how deep Brendan goes. I know the heft with which he launches the shovel to the centre of his curiosity, and so I knew. So when we met, I said, "Look, I thought maybe you wanted a bit of space." Because this is not a spoiler alert, because it doesn't have to say the first couple of minutes, bless you, the first couple of minutes matters. The first couple of minutes of the film, the line, this fella might not want to be your friend anymore, and that's it. So you don't get really an exploration of what it was to be together, to share joy, to have that communion. And so I thought, well, maybe he'll want a bit of space. And if he does, that's grand. I totally respect that. I've worked with actors that do want a bit more space and do stay closer to their character throughout the day. I've worked with other actors who are often having a laugh and then they hear it roll sound and they're pumped straight into it. It's extraordinary. There's no right, no wrong. And we saw each other and I said, listen, he said, do you think? And he had the same kind of thought. The two of us looked at each other and went, we just need it, if I can say we. And there's a wellspring. I've said that we don't have much more of a shorthand when we shot this film as we did on Bruges, because we had a shorthand for some reason, some kind of undefinable reason from my perspective. We had a shorthand from the start, but we come to the work from the same direction. I think certainly for me, to be able to bounce things off him and to be able to have the kind of care and consideration that he exudes as an actor. He's one of the most generous, thoughtful human beings I've ever met anyway. And that generosity and that thoughtfulness, that doesn't get pushed to the side, it doesn't get diluted. If anything, it gets magnified by the creative process. So to be close to that, and to be able to lean into that in between the takes, because the conversations that took place in the 3 weeks in the rehearsal space, those conversations were a launching point still. As I was saying earlier, it wasn't like we arrived with certainty. It launched us into the next round of conversations and the next round of conversations. But the familiarity for me was aces. So there were times when we're doing scenes, as you'll see, you can imagine which scenes might have been the ones, if you want to play a little game during the film. But hopefully you won't be that bored. There were days when naturally, you know, he'd be at one end of the bar, and I'd be at the other end of the bar, and I know he'd be going through the scene and the last setup and the next setup and staying close to what we were finding was the core of what was happening. And I'd be doing the same, you know, and we wouldn't be saying a word to each other for an hour or two, but there'd be no looks getting thrown.
Yeah, I remember going out and looking at the sea, particularly at John's pub, and it was just savage out there. It was so beautiful against the rocks, and the two of us go out kind of, and it would be one of those scenes that were kind of quite, you know, conflicted, and just the two of us could just take the energy off the scene and just stand there and look at it. And we knew that we were both involved in the same thing. And similarly, just like with some people, like I've worked with loads of people, like Colin was talking about, again, we were talking about different forms and whether you need rehearsal or not. Some people need as a process to be right in there all the time, as long as there's integrity about that search, and it's not just posing and throwing shapes for some sort of egotistical reasons. It's phenomenally, you feel privileged to be a part of it, and then you have to up your game in a particular way. But the collaborative process whereby we could kind of bounce stuff off each other and then go back into the ring. And similarly in Bruges, I remember you saying to me one day, it was, I think, the one where we were on the swing, talking with the gunman and stuff. I think that's my favourite still from the movie, is where I'm pointing to Glad and telling him not to kill himself. Or I'll shoot you, basically, is the implication. And all that whole thing that plays out, it's just so brilliant. And then he's saying, shoot yourself. I know. Still doesn't make sense. I know. And then I tell you, I robbed the gun, this little baby gun off, and I won't give it back. But I remember we just had a really good day that day in the park during the morning. And then I saw his whole face, Colin's face, completely darkened. And he says, you have to go back in. The scene being shot in the afternoon was basically ready to turn, you know, he was a child killer. And, I mean, he had been a child killer when he was trying to kill himself, obviously. And that part was part of the morning. But we come through it where there was a bit of levity, and it was when we were able to have a laugh. And we were on these swings. It was silly. And I saw his whole face in the dark, and he said, I have to go back into the space. And it was the first time I realised how much kind of, you know, pain it was inhabiting that guilt within the film for him. But that it was a good release for us both to be able to kind of share those moments without feeling that we're crossing the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As you said, nature took care of a lot of the force. The force that was happening between the islanders and between your character and my character in the film was not only matched, of course, but was transcended by the crashing of the waves off that coastline.
Yeah.
I mean, where you built the bar that you'll see in the next film, John Joe's Bar, where a lot of the two cornerstones of Irish community back then were the church and the pub, you know, and where you built that. I mean, the first time you saw him, the first time after seeing where the bar was built, and it was so lovely. Brendan went up and shook Martin's hand and said, "Congratulations." I went, "So weird, but beautiful and really appropriate." He said, "Congratulations to you for choosing that location."
So brave.
It was so brave. It really was. It was so God. It was the end of the world.
Stupid.
No, it was the end of the world. It was extraordinary,
Yeah.
and it fed into everything that we did. It really did, man. It fed into everything. Knowing that was outside, not just as actors, but everyone living there, knowing that that's what you step out into, and that's what you come in away from to get shelter from at the same time. It was extraordinary.
But remember, we'd stop the scene sometimes because it was a perfect sunset. Just
Totally.
go watch it down. The whole crew just looking at the horizon, then go back in.
Yeah,
between
I
them.
sent Kerry a picture of that. Kerry Condon, who plays Siobhan in the film next month, I sent Kerry a picture of that today because I've been blathering on about it for a while.
Yeah.
But picture, she's there, and nearly every day, and we shot in the pub for a lot around the time of the sunset. The crew, 40 or 50 people, the cast of the crew, would just wander out the door of the pub, and we just take 5 minutes. And you know, as you said, time is a big concern on these things. And it wasn't 5 minutes because the camera broke. It was 5 minutes because the sun was just heading towards the horizon as it does, and the sky just changed character every day, and it was equally beautiful each time we saw it. But yeah,
It's
it
feeding
really,
us. It's feeding us.
yeah, it really was. It was beautiful. It was such a special film.
Well, I want to wrap this up so we can watch Banshees, but
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
It's gonna be sunsets.
But I want to thank you guys. They're both beautiful movies. I really appreciate you coming out and taking the time to talk to us.